Doom vivamus vivamus Epicureans. This is the BCE Comics Pod one-shot edition. I'm your host, Nick Smith, and I'm joined by...
Stojr from Stojr Shelf. How's it going, Nick?
I'm doing okay. My voice is starting to give out a little bit. This is going to be definitely going to be the last one in this session that we're recording, because we record in advance, because we're crazy like that. All right, we are participating in Kurtis Findlay's Epic Marvel Podcast Reading Club, and this one-shot is going to be our brief thoughts on today's issue, which is X-Men Annual number 8, The Adventures of Lockheed the Space Dragon and His Pet Girl Kitty. All right, so this is written by Chris Claremont, of course, after an original idea by Joe Duffy. Art is by Steve Leia Aloha. I think I goofed that up. Let me try it again. Leia Aloha. There we go. I struggled with Italian, geez, there I go. Yep, it's late at night. Hawaiian names I often struggle with. There's in the history class I teach, I have to talk about the last queen of Hawaii, and I always trip over her name. It's a long one. All right, let's see. Let's actually get into the comic book. As the X-Men and New Mutants sit around a campfire, stories are being shared. After Wolverine finishes his, Illyana tells a tale about Lockheed and Kitty fighting the White Queen in space. It is meant to be an analogy of the difficult relationships faced by Kitty, Colossus, and Storm, and the need for them to get over their problems and move on. And that is definitely simplifying things, but I think that's where we are. All right, Stojr, your thoughts.
I mean, I just, we went back to this kind of storytelling trope of having them tell like a fantasy story and having a sort of an analogy here. And I'm just not the biggest fan of this, or at least not the biggest fan of it taking this long, right? The fact that it's a full annual issue, cover to cover with all of this going on for so long. The cover of this book looks like I thought Dazzler was going to be in it with the way they have the White Queen set up there. And it's just like the art is super like kind of simplistic, but I guess that's on a little bit on purpose because it's trying to tell a children's story. I'm not the biggest fan of like Wolverine's characterization in the beginning. Like it feels like all of a sudden he's like the fun uncle in the beginning of the story, and like that kind of felt like it came out of nowhere as he's telling this story. I do like them all kind of around the campfire. Like that's kind of like a cool image and seeing them all hang out. But we kind of haven't seen the New Mutants hang out with the X-Men at all yet. So while, hey, there's a first time for everything, it also feels a little odd. Like when have the rest of the X-Men interacted with Warlock, right? Like and having him here. On top of the fact that like Kitty and Wolverine were in Japan for what feels like 17 years as we went through the Kitty Pryde and Wolverine series. So I struggled to get through this annual. The art wasn't my favorite. The storytelling wasn't like really what I was up for. And maybe it's just the framing device that they're using here that I'm not a fan of. And that's why I had such a hard time with it. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. Honestly, I was bored with this one. When we had Kitty's bedtime story from issue 153, that was fine. That was a fun little departure. This one, I feel like we're trying to go back to the well again and recapture that magic, but really it just kind of dragged. And probably because this is an annual issue, which is a lot longer, right? When it comes to Steve Leia Aloha's art, which I just double-checked, he was born in San Francisco, but the son of a native Hawaiian, so yes, it is a Hawaiian name. I feel like his art is kind of hit or miss for me, to be honest. It does feel very basic and blocky, which I'm not too much of a fan of, but he does have some cool layouts. I mean, this splash page that I have up here with Wolverine in the middle and the images and branches kind of swirling around him, I thought that's pretty cool. The montage of Kitty growing up on page, I think it's 119. Let me see if I can find it here. I'm a sucker for a montage. I think we've determined that. You break those panels and I start getting interested. Anyway, I thought that one it was good too, but for the most part, I'm kind of maybe not the greatest thing. But I really don't have much more to say about the story itself because yeah, it's just kind of a rehash in a different way that I gave in my rundown. There's one thing that I ended up going down a rabbit hole on though, and that's here on page 120. We have Kitty trying on all these different outfits, and you note it says there fashion designs by Trina Roberts. So I was thinking, what is this? Particularly since I don't know why, but this one in particular, that the way she's standing there, the look, it reminded me of something that I had seen that somewhere. So I started looking up Trina Roberts because I had not been familiar with her name, and shame on me. Trina Roberts was a pioneer of women in comic books. She co-created the first all-woman created comic book, which was called "It Ain't Me, Babe." Before she became a comic creator, she was a fashion designer, and she owned a boutique in New York. In fact, she designed some clothing for Mama Cass and David Crosby of Crosby, Stills, and Nash. When she started illustrating for comics, some of her early work was also fashion design, and probably her most famous design is the costume for Vampirella, which she created in 1969, and which Frank Frazetta was drawing. So that one piece V thing that Vampirella still wears today. Her Marvel work would include a comic book called Misty in Marvel's Star Line. All right, the Star Line was geared towards children, and this comic followed the adventures of Millie the Model's niece. Millie the Model being one of those early Marvel kind of romance comics that were geared towards girls. People who are fans of DC probably know her for drawing the Legend of Wonder Woman limited series that came out after Crisis on Infinite Earths. But as for the Misty comic book, Robbins began working on that in 1985, so that's kind of in line with when this issue was published. And when she heard that Marvel intended to create the Star Line geared towards children, she approached Jim Shooter to pitch the idea of a comic geared towards young girls, like how Millie the Model inspired her to become a comic creator. She was like, well, there's nothing for young girls that's being published in the 80s, so she wanted to do something like that. However, she actively wanted to avoid her characters being like Betty and Veronica and Archie, but rather that her female characters should have their own ambitions, their own desires, and not just be chasing boys all the time. I also was, as I was looking around, her Misty comics tended to contain some paper dolls in them, so her fashion experience was definitely being played up in that book she was doing for Marvel, and I think that's why she was also getting tagged here for these fashion designs for Kitty in this book. And again, I swear I've seen that pose in the third panel somewhere, but in all my looking it up, I couldn't find it. So it just looked incredibly familiar to me.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And that paper doll stuff, although it like ruined comics, obviously, if somebody's going to cut it all up, it was look, if you ever see those things, it's really kind of cool for kids to have. Like I can picture my daughter like loving something like that. She loves arts and crafts stuff, and to be able to kind of very easily just like cut out a human figure and then cut out the a bunch of different dresses or outfits or whatever, and basically you just have little tabs that kind of fold over in back of the paper mannequin, and you can swap it out, and it's so smart because you can fit so much on the page, if you just kind of maneuver it in the right way, and then you have people, you have them cut it out to do that stuff. So it's a real cool concept, and I know that some of that model stuff does make a connection to modern Marvel comics with Hellcat,
Hellcat, yep.
who was
Patsy
Patsy
Walker,
Walker,
yeah.
and Patsy Walker was in the Millie the model comic, and then she obviously becomes Hellcat and has that connection to the past, and she even marries Damian Hellstorm at some point and all of that stuff. And she was featured in the Jessica Jones Netflix series, um, never in costume, but I think they alluded to her having powers, and I think she was a model if I remember correctly in that show. So there was a lot of different connection points there for that character. So the Million Model stuff is not just kind of old 50s, 60s things that kind of went away. Like there are some little breadcrumbs to bring it to the modern Marvel universe.
Yeah, it and that's the beauty of comics and the beauty of Marvel. I think is there you will always get creators who will come in and they'll have their pet characters from the past that they like and want to bring in somehow or another. And if you know enough about the Marvel universe, you can catch all those Easter eggs. Like just like the films. That's why it's in the films, right? It's kind of part of the Marvel universe. It's all connected. And I was thinking, to your point of the cutting up the paper dolls out of books and how it would ruin them. Well, that's what comics were meant for, right? This is supposed to be disposable entertainment. We're the weird guys who like to collect them, hold on to them, and all that stuff. But yeah, you're supposed to cut up your comics. That's why you'd have a. Gosh, what was it? It's like, what, issue 5 or 8 of Amazing Spider-Man. Stan Lee leaves the word balloons blank, and he says, you just fill it in on your own, Go on, kids, have fun. It's what you're supposed to do in comics. All right, I don't have anything else for this one because honestly, it was a boring issue. I didn't care for it, but I went down the rabbit hole with Trina Robbins, and well, now I kind of want to read some Misty, to be honest. I know it's meant for kids, but I'm curious that there was a mission behind that. I want to know what's going on there.
Yeah, we'll have to get the old Western Epic Collection lines and the old fashion or whatever they called it, Epic Collection lines. So
Yeah. Or just a star line. Throw it all in there. We have a precedent. We have Ewoks and droids. They were part of the star line. We can do stars and epics. All right. Stojr, any other final thoughts?
No, I mean, I'm looking forward to the next issue. We're going to get the 2-issue limited series of X-Men and Alpha Flight with the return of Paul Smith on art. I don't have my hopes up that the art is going to be as good as it was before, but I haven't read them yet. So this is my stopping point with how much I've read ahead. So I'm looking forward to reading those 2 issues and kind of getting back acquainted with both Alpha Flight and Paul Smith's art.
Yep. Same here, and I'll just leave it at that. All right. Thank you, guys. Again, if you've enjoyed our thoughts, follow us on YouTube. We're going to read, rate, review a full big collected edition comic once a month, plus these daily one-shots. Do all the stuff that the content creators tell you to do, like, subscribe. I think we're obligated to say that if we're on a social media platform, right?
Yeah,
we have to beg
gotta
for
get the
engagement.
subscribers up.
Yeah. We just enjoy doing this. We enjoy sharing it, and we like hearing your thoughts. All of you leave comments and so forth. But generally appreciate it. All right. Thank you, guys. We'll catch you next time.